Narrated by Patricia Harrison, age 52. Have you ever received a message that made you question everything you thought you knew about your own life? What if I told you that one text message could reveal that your entire family was a lie? That the son you raised for 28 years wasn't really yours? And that the people you trusted most were planning to murder you for insurance money? What if I told you that everything you're about to hear actually happened to me? My name is Patricia, and 6 months ago, I was sitting at what I thought was a normal family dinner when my phone buzzed. The message I received had only 17 words, but those 17 words shattered my reality and led me into the most terrifying conspiracy I could never have imagined. By the end of this story, you'll understand why I can never look at my phone the same way again, and why a simple family dinner became a fight for my life. This is not fiction. This is not a movie plot. This happened to me, and it could happen to you. The message read, "Get up and go to the bathroom. Look out the window. Don't say anything to your mom about this text." But here's the thing. I am the mom. It was a Tuesday evening in March when I received the call from my son Jake. "Mom, want to come over for dinner tonight? I'm making your favorite, lasagna." I was surprised. Jake was 28, married to his wife Emma for 2 years, and family dinners weren't exactly his usual thing, but I wasn't going to question quality time with my son. "Sure, sounds wonderful. What time?" "7. Oh, and Mom? Emma's really excited to see you. She's been asking about you. Since my husband died 4 years ago, Jake and Emma had been my lifeline. They lived just 20 minutes away, and seeing them was always the highlight of my week. But spontaneous dinner invitations were rare." "That's sweet of her. Should I bring anything?" "Just yourself, Mom. We have everything covered." Something in his tone seemed off, but I pushed the thought away. Maybe he had good news to share. Maybe Emma was pregnant. At 52, I was more than ready to be a grandmother. I arrived at Jake and Emma's house at exactly 7. Jake answered the door with a smile that seemed a little too bright. "Mom? Perfect timing. Come in, come in." The house smelled incredible. Emma's lasagna was legendary in our family. But as I walked in, I noticed something odd. The dining room table was set for 4 people, not 3. "Are we expecting someone else?" I asked. "Oh, that's for my mom," Emma called from the kitchen. She decided to join us at the last minute. Emma's mother, Dorothy. I'd met her several times at family gatherings, and while she was always polite, there was something about her that made me uncomfortable. She had a way of asking very personal questions about my finances, my late husband's insurance, my living situation. "That's nice," I said, trying to hide my disappointment. I had hoped for an intimate family dinner. Dorothy arrived 15 minutes later, carrying a bottle of wine and wearing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Patricia, how lovely to see you again." "You too, Dorothy." We sat down to dinner, and the conversation felt forced from the beginning. Dorothy kept steering the discussion toward my personal life. "How are you managing financially, Patricia? It must be difficult being alone." "I'm doing fine, thank you." "But the house you and your husband bought, isn't it quite large for just one person? The property taxes alone must be substantial." Emma shot her mother a warning look, but Dorothy continued. "I just worry about you, dear. Living alone in such a big house, managing all those finances by yourself. Have you thought about downsizing? Or perhaps getting some help managing your affairs? Jake was unusually quiet, picking at his food and avoiding eye contact. Mum's perfectly capable of managing her own affairs, he said finally. But his voice lacked conviction. Of course she is, Dorothy said quickly. I just meant that sometimes it's helpful to have someone to bounce ideas off of. Someone with experience in financial planning. You work in financial planning? I asked. Dorothy's smile widened. In a way, I help people organize their assets, plan for the future, make sure their affairs are in order. Something about the way she said it made my skin crawl. We were about halfway through dinner when my phone buzzed. I normally wouldn't check it during a family meal, but the sound was unusually loud in what had become an uncomfortable silence. Sorry, I said, glancing at my phone. Probably a spam call. But it wasn't spam. It was a text from a number I didn't recognize. Get up and go to the bathroom. Look out the window. Don't say anything to your mum about this text. I stared at the message, my fork halfway to my mouth. My mum? What did that mean? My mother had been dead for 10 years. Wait. Don't say anything to your mum. The text was meant for Jake. Mom? Everything okay? Jake asked, his voice sharp with concern. I looked up. All three of them were staring at me. Dorothy's face had gone pale. Emma looked confused. Jake's hand was clenched around his fork. Yeah, just work stuff. Excuse me for a minute. I stood up, my legs feeling shaky. Just need to use the bathroom. Of course, Emma said quickly. You know where it is. As I walked down the hallway, I could hear them resuming conversation behind me, but their voices were hushed, urgent. I went into the bathroom and immediately looked out the window. It faced the backyard, which was dark except for the porch light. At first, I didn't see anything unusual. Then I saw it. A car parked on the street behind the house, positioned so it had a clear view of the backyard. The engine was running, exhaust visible in the cold air, but the headlights were off. My hands were shaking as I typed a response. Who is this? I think you have the wrong number. The response came immediately. Patricia, this is your brother Tom. You're in danger. Your family is not who you think they are. Tom? My brother Tom lived 300 miles away in Chicago. We talked maybe once a month. Tom, how do you have this number? What's going on? No time to explain. Trust me. Make an excuse and leave now. This is insane. I'm having dinner with Jake and Emma. Patricia, Jake is not your biological son. The world stopped. I read the message 3 times, certain I had misunderstood. What are you talking about? I'll explain everything, but you need to get out of that house right now. They're planning something. I stood in that bathroom, my entire world crumbling around me. Jake wasn't my biological son? That was impossible. I gave birth to him. I raised him. I had pictures of me pregnant, hospital records, birth certificates. My phone buzzed again. Patricia, I know this sounds crazy, but Jake was switched at birth. The real Jake died in infancy. The people you think are your family are part of a larger conspiracy. You're insane. I'm calling the police. The police can't help with this. Please. I've been investigating this for months. Just trust me and get out of the house. I flushed the toilet and washed my hands with trembling fingers. This was insane. Tom had clearly lost his mind, or someone was playing a sick joke on me. But as I walked back toward the dining room, I heard Dorothy's voice. Has to be tonight. We've waited too long already. I know, but I need more time to... Jake, we don't have more time. She's getting suspicious. I froze in the hallway. They were talking about me. I pressed myself against the wall, listening to their conversation. Mom, I can't do this, Jake was saying. She raised me. She loves me. She loves who she thinks you are, Dorothy replied. But that person was never real. You've been playing a role your entire life. What if she finds out the truth? Emma asked. She won't, Dorothy said firmly. After tonight, it won't matter what she knows. My blood turned to ice. After tonight? I don't want to hurt her, Jake said, his voice breaking. You're not hurting her, sweetheart. You're ending her suffering. She's been living a lie for 28 years. In a way, we're setting her free. By killing her, Jake's voice was barely a whisper. By giving her peace. The insurance money will set us up for life, and she'll finally be with her real son. I had to bite my hand to keep from screaming. They were planning to kill me. These people I thought were my family were planning to murder me for insurance money. My phone buzzed quietly. Another text from Tom. Are you safe? Can you get out? I typed back quickly. They're planning to kill me. How did you know? Long story. Can you get to the back door? I think so. I'm in the car behind the house. When you see me flash the headlights, run. I crept toward the back of the house, my heart pounding so loudly I was sure they could hear it. The conversation in the dining room continued. How are we going to make it look like an accident? Emma asked. Home invasion, Dorothy replied. I have contacts who can stage it properly. It will look like she surprised a burglar. I reached the back door and slowly, quietly turned the knob. Locked. Of course it was locked. I looked around desperately and saw the key hanging on a hook nearby. As I reached for it, I heard footsteps in the hallway. Patricia! Are you okay in there? Jake called out. Just a minute, I called back, trying to keep my voice steady. I grabbed the key and unlocked the door as quietly as possible. Through the window, I saw headlights flash twice. This was it. I opened the door and ran into the darkness. Tom was waiting by the fence, and he grabbed my arm as I stumbled toward him. Patricia! Thank God, we need to go. Now! Tom, what the hell is going on? How did you know they were planning to kill me? I'll explain everything, but we need to get away from here first. We ran to his car and drove away, just as I heard Jake shouting my name from the backyard. 20 minutes later, we were sitting in a 24-hour diner, and Tom was showing me documents that shattered everything I thought I knew about my life. Patricia, the baby you gave birth to 28 years ago, died 3 days after he was born. That's impossible. Jake is not your son. He's the biological child of Dorothy and a man named Frank Morrison. They switched him with your dead baby as part of an insurance fraud scheme. Tom spread photographs and medical records across the table. Your real son, Jake Harrison, died of complications from premature birth. But instead of telling you, the hospital staff, who were being paid by Dorothy and Frank, told you he was fine and gave you their healthy baby. I stared at the documents in shock. Death certificate for Jake Harrison. Birth certificate for Jake Morrison. Hospital records showing the switch. Why would they do this? Money, Tom said grimly. Your husband had a substantial life insurance policy that would pass to you and then to your children. By placing their son in your family, they positioned themselves to inherit everything when you died. But Tom, I raised Jake from birth. He's my son in every way that matters. I know this is devastating. But Patricia, everything about your relationship with Jake has been carefully orchestrated. Dorothy has been manipulating him his entire life, teaching him to see you as a means to an end. Tom showed me more documents. Financial records, correspondence, surveillance photos. Dorothy runs a network of people who specialize in long-term cons, targeting families with substantial assets. They identify wealthy couples, arrange for baby switches, and then wait decades to cash in. How many families have they done this to? We've identified at least 12 other cases over the past 30 years. You're not the first, Patricia. I felt sick to my stomach. What happened to the other families? Tom's expression was grim. Most of them are dead, made to look like accidents or natural causes, but always after the children were positioned to inherit. And Jake has been part of this his whole life? That's the complicated part. I don't think Jake fully understood what was happening until recently. Dorothy raised him to love you genuinely, but also to see himself as entitled to your assets. It's only now that you're getting older and asking questions about your finances that they've decided to move to the final phase. Tom, how did you find out about all this? Do you remember when you asked me to help you organize Dad's financial papers after he died? I nodded. After our father passed away 2 years ago, I had asked Tom to help me sort through his estate documents. I found some correspondence between Dad and a private investigator. Apparently, Dad had been suspicious about Jake for years. Suspicious how? Little things. Jake's blood type didn't match what it should have been based on you and your husband's genetics. Some childhood medical records that didn't quite add up. Dad hired an investigator to look into it. Tom pulled out a thick folder. The investigator uncovered the entire conspiracy, but Dad died before he could tell you about it. I found his notes hidden in his safe deposit box. Why didn't you tell me sooner? Because I thought Dad was being paranoid. The evidence seemed impossible to believe. It was only when I started investigating further that I realized he was right. Tom showed me surveillance photos of Dorothy meeting with other people I didn't recognize. This is Dorothy meeting with Frank Morrison, Jake's biological father, and this is her meeting with Dr. Elizabeth Crenshaw, the doctor who oversaw your delivery and facilitated the switch. Doctor, Crenshaw is still alive? She was until last month. She died in what appeared to be a car accident, but I think Dorothy had her killed to eliminate a witness. Tom, this is all incredible, but how can you prove Jake isn't my biological son? DNA testing, I managed to get a sample of Jake's hair from his barber shop. I compared it to a sample of your hair. He handed me a laboratory report. Patricia, there's no genetic relationship between you and Jake. None. I stared at the results, my world crumbling. But I have pictures of me pregnant, hospital records, all falsified. The pregnancy was real, but the baby you took home wasn't the baby you gave birth to. Tom showed me hospital surveillance footage from 28 years ago. Grainy, but clear enough to see medical staff switching babies in the nursery. They kept your real son alive, just long enough to get you emotionally attached, then made the switch when he died. You never knew the difference because you were sedated during the most critical period. What about my husband? Didn't he notice anything? Your husband was told that the baby needed special care and couldn't be held for the first few days. By the time you both interacted with the baby regularly, it had already been switched. Tom, how extensive is this conspiracy? Larger than you can imagine. Dorothy is part of a network that includes doctors, nurses, lawyers, insurance agents, and even some law enforcement officials. He showed me an organizational chart that looked like something from a crime movie. They've been operating for over 40 years. They target wealthy families, arrange for baby switches or adoptions, and then wait for decades before moving to eliminate the adoptive parents and claim inheritance. How do they choose their targets? Couples with substantial assets but small families. Preferably, couples where one or both parents are older and more likely to die within 20 to 30 years of the switch. And Jake has been part of this his whole life. That's where it gets complicated. Jake was raised to love you genuinely, but also to accept that he would inherit your assets when you died. Dorothy has been gradually preparing him for this moment. Tom pulled out recorded conversations. We've been monitoring Dorothy's communications for months. Jake has been reluctant to participate in the final phase. He genuinely cares about you. But Dorothy has been pressuring him, telling him it's the only way to protect his real family. His real family? Patricia, Jake has been married to Emma for 2 years, but Emma isn't just his wife. She's also part of the network. Emma's real name is Lisa Morrison. She's Jake's cousin. I felt like I was going to throw up. They're related? Not closely enough to be illegal, but closely enough to ensure family loyalty. Emma/Lisa was specifically chosen to marry Jake to keep him tied to the network. Tom showed me more documents. Emma has been reporting on your activities, your health, your financial situation. Every conversation you've had with her has been shared with Dorothy. What about Jake's childhood friends? His school experiences? All carefully managed. Jake attended schools where Dorothy had connections. His friends were either part of the network or carefully vetted. His entire life has been constructed to support this lie. But his personality, his interests, those are real. Dorothy is smart enough to know that Jake needed to develop a genuine personality to be convincing. The love he feels for you is real, but it's been manipulated and complicated by his loyalty to his biological family. Tom, why now? Why are they moving against me after 28 years? Several factors. First, you're getting older and asking more questions about financial planning. Second, Dorothy's network has been under investigation by federal authorities. They need to cash out their long-term investments quickly. Federal investigation? The FBI has been tracking unusual patterns in insurance payouts and inheritance transfers. They've identified several suspicious cases, and they're getting close to uncovering the network. So Dorothy is trying to eliminate evidence. Exactly. You represent decades of investment and planning. If they can't collect on you, they lose everything. Tom pulled out more surveillance photos. But there's something else. Dorothy is sick. Sick how? Cancer. Terminal. She has maybe 6 months to live. This is her last chance to secure her family's financial future. And Jake knows this. Yes. Dorothy has been playing on his emotions, telling him that this is his chance to honor the woman who raised him and secure his own family's future. Tom, what do we do now? Call the police. I've been working with federal agents for months. We have evidence of the network's activities, but we need more to make arrests stick. What kind of evidence? We need Dorothy to confess to the murders and the baby switching operation. We need Jake to provide testimony about how the network operates. How do we get that? Tom leaned forward. Patricia, I need you to go back. Go back? Are you insane? They tried to kill me tonight. They didn't try to kill you tonight. Tonight was preparation. They were going to drug you and stage a home invasion later this week. How do you know that? Because we've been monitoring their communications. The plan is to make it look like you interrupted a burglary and were killed by the intruder. Tom pulled out recording equipment. We need you to wear a wire and get Dorothy to confess. Once we have her on tape admitting to the murders and the baby switching, we can bring down the entire network. What if something goes wrong? I'll be listening in real time. The moment you're in danger, federal agents will move in. The next evening, I found myself back at Jake and Emma's house, wearing a sophisticated recording device and feeling like I was walking into a trap. I had called Jake that morning, pretending to be confused about the previous night. I'm so sorry I ran off like that, I told him. I got a weird text and panicked. Can we try dinner again tonight? Jake had sounded relieved. Of course, Mom. We were so worried about you. Now, standing on their doorstep, I felt like I was about to confront strangers who had been wearing the faces of my family for 28 years. Jake answered the door, and for a moment I saw him as he really was. A man I didn't know, playing a role he'd been trained for since birth. Mom, I'm so glad you came back. We need to talk about what happened last night. I'd like that, I said, following him into the house. Dorothy and Emma were already there, sitting in the living room like they were waiting for me. Patricia, Dorothy said warmly. We were so concerned when you left so suddenly. I got spooked by something silly, I said, sitting down across from them. But I realized I was being paranoid. The three of them exchanged glances. Actually, I continued, I've been thinking about what you said, Dorothy, about organizing my financial affairs. Dorothy's eyes lit up. Oh? With my husband gone and me getting older, I realize I need to be more practical about planning for the future. That's very wise, Patricia. The thing is, I've been carrying around some guilt for 28 years, and I think it's time I dealt with it. Jake leaned forward. What kind of guilt, Mom? This was it. The moment of truth. Jake, there's something I never told you about your birth. I watched Dorothy's face carefully. She was trying to look concerned, but I could see the calculation in her eyes. What about my birth? You almost died when you were born. In fact, for a few hours, the doctors thought we had lost you. Dorothy's expression didn't change, but her posture stiffened slightly. I never knew that, Jake said softly. The doctors were able to save you, obviously, but it was touch and go for a while. I've always wondered if there were complications that we didn't know about. What kind of complications? Dorothy asked. Well, I've been thinking about genetics lately. Health issues that might run in families. And I realize I should probably get some medical testing done to make sure there aren't any hereditary conditions I should be worried about. That's a good idea, Emma said, but her voice was strained. In fact, I was thinking Jake and I should both get comprehensive genetic testing. You know, compare our results, make sure we understand any health risks. The room fell silent. Dorothy recovered first. Patricia, genetic testing can be expensive and often unnecessary. Oh, I don't mind the expense. I want to make sure Jake has all the medical information he might need for his own family planning. I looked directly at Dorothy. Unless you think there's some reason we shouldn't do the testing. Dorothy stood up and walked to the window, her back to us. When she turned around, her demeanor had completely changed. Patricia, I think it's time we had an honest conversation. About what? About what you really know. The mask was coming off. I could see Jake looking confused, but Emma was watching Dorothy with understanding. I'm not sure what you mean, Dorothy. I think you are. I think your brother Tom has been filling your head with stories about Jake's birth. Jake's head snapped up. What stories about my birth? Dorothy ignored him, keeping her eyes fixed on me. The question is, how much do you actually know? I know that Jake isn't my biological son. Jake's face went white. What? I know that my real son died shortly after birth, and that you switched him with your own son as part of an insurance fraud scheme. Emma gasped, but Dorothy remained calm. Jake, Dorothy said quietly, it's time you knew the truth about your family. What truth? Jake's voice was barely a whisper. The truth is that Patricia is not your biological mother. The truth is that you are my grandson, and Frank Morrison is your real father. Jake stood up unsteadily. That's impossible. The truth is that we've been planning for this moment for 28 years. The woman you think of as your mother has been living off assets that rightfully belong to our family. Dorothy, I said, are you confessing to baby switching and insurance fraud? That saves you, she laughed. I'm confessing to protecting my family and securing our future, just like any good mother would do. Jake, Dorothy continued, your real mother died when you were 2 years old. Frank and I raised you, but we knew that to give you the best life possible, we needed to place you with a family that had resources. By stealing someone else's baby. By giving you opportunities you never would have had otherwise. Patricia and her husband provided you with an excellent education, a loving home, and access to substantial inheritance. Jake was crying now. But I love her. She's my mother. She's been a wonderful caretaker, Dorothy said dismissively. But she's not family. We are family. Dorothy, I interrupted. How many other families have you done this to? Over the years, quite a few. It's a service, really. We match children who need resources with families who have resources. And when the adoptive parents get older, they're reunited with their real children in heaven, and their assets go to the people who actually deserve them. You mean you murder them? Dorothy's expression hardened. I help people transition peacefully. Most of them are lonely, aging and ready to go anyway. How many people have you killed? Enough to secure comfortable futures for dozens of children and grandchildren. The recording device was capturing every word. Jake stood up suddenly, his face contorted with anguish. Stop! Just stop talking. He turned to me. Is it true? Are you really not my mother? I looked at this man I had raised and loved for 28 years. Biologically, no. But Jake, you are my son in every way that matters to me. But the DNA tests, the hospital records, they're all real, Dorothy said. Patricia, show him the DNA results your brother provided. I pulled out Tom's folder and showed Jake the test results. He stared at them for a long time. 28 years, he whispered. My entire life has been a lie. Not a lie, I said firmly. Different than we thought, but not a lie. Jake, I love you. That hasn't changed. But I'm not really your son. You are really my son. Maybe not by blood, but by choice, by love, by 28 years of shared life. Dorothy interrupted. Jake, sentiment is lovely, but we need to be practical. Patricia has substantial assets that need to be transferred to their rightful owners. By killing her? By helping her transition peacefully? Yes. Emma spoke up for the first time in several minutes. Jake, your grandmother is sick. This is our last chance to secure the family's future. Our family's future? What about Patricia? What about the life we've built? The life you've built was always temporary, Dorothy said. It was always leading to this moment. There's something else, Dorothy continued. Something you don't know about your real parents. Jake looked at her with exhausted eyes. What now? Your mother, your biological mother, didn't die of natural causes. What do you mean? She was going to expose our operation. She found out about the baby switching and threatened to go to the police. The room fell silent, except for the sound of Jake's labored breathing. So, I helped her transition peacefully, just like I'm going to help Patricia. You killed my real mother too? I protected our family's interests. Jake stumbled backward. You're a monster. I'm a survivor, and I've raised you to be a survivor too. Dorothy pulled a gun from her purse. Now, Patricia, I need you to sit down and stay calm. We're going to wait here until Frank arrives, and then we're going to take care of this situation, once and for all. I could feel the panic button in my pocket, but I needed Dorothy to keep talking first. Dorothy, how many people have you killed over the years? Enough. The first few were difficult, but it gets easier when you understand that you're serving a larger purpose. What larger purpose? Ensuring that resources go to people who can use them productively instead of being wasted on people who are going to die anyway. She gestured with the gun. Jake, sit down next to Patricia. Emma, go make sure all the doors are locked. I pressed the panic button in my pocket, hoping Tom was monitoring the signal. Dorothy, I said, trying to keep her talking. What happens to Jake after you kill me? Jake inherits your assets and disappears. He and Emma will relocate somewhere far away and live comfortably on your insurance money. And if he refuses to participate? Dorothy's expression turned cold. Then Jake will unfortunately become a victim of the same home invasion that kills you. Jake's head snapped up. You would kill me too? I would do whatever is necessary to protect the family's interests. That's when we heard the sound of cars pulling up outside. Dorothy rushed to the window. What the hell? Red and blue lights were flashing outside. Car doors were slamming. Someone was shouting orders through a megaphone. Federal agents! The house is surrounded! Dorothy spun around, pointing the gun at me. You set us up. Dorothy Williams, this is the FBI. Come out with your hands up. She was trapped, and she knew it. Jake, she said desperately, help me. We can still get out of this. But Jake was staring at her with a mixture of horror and disgust. You're insane, he said quietly. You've destroyed everything. The front door burst open, and federal agents flooded the house. Dorothy was arrested along with Emma and 12 other members of their network. The investigation revealed that they had been operating for over 40 years, switching babies and murdering adoptive parents in at least 15 different states. Jake was not charged with any crimes. The FBI determined that he had been a victim of the conspiracy rather than a willing participant. But the revelation about his true parentage destroyed him. I don't know who I am anymore, he told me during one of our conversations after Dorothy's arrest. Everything I thought I knew about myself, about my family, about my life, it was all constructed. Jake, you are exactly who you've always been. The only thing that's changed is some biological facts. But those facts matter. I've been living in your house, inheriting your husband's money, taking opportunities that should have gone to your real son. My real son is sitting right here, I said firmly. Biology doesn't determine family. Love does. Choice does. 28 years of shared life does. But Jake struggled with the guilt and the identity crisis. He and Emma, whose real name was Lisa, divorced after she was sentenced to 15 years in prison for her role in the conspiracy. Dorothy's trial was a media sensation. The prosecution revealed the full scope of her operation. Dozens of families destroyed. Millions of dollars in fraudulent insurance claims, and at least 37 murders disguised as accidents or natural causes. I testified about my own experience, about the dinner where Dorothy confessed to the crimes, about the 28 years I had unknowingly lived as part of her elaborate con. Mrs. Harrison, the prosecutor asked me, how do you feel about the defendant now that you know the truth about your son's parentage? I feel sorry for her, I said, looking directly at Dorothy. She spent 40 years destroying families and manipulating children, and she convinced herself she was doing good. She's wasted her entire life on hatred and greed. Do you forgive her? I don't forgive the murders or the manipulation, but I'm grateful to her for one thing. She gave me Jake. Whether she intended to or not, she put my son in my life. And that's the greatest gift anyone has ever given me. Dorothy was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. 2 years after Dorothy's arrest, Jake and I are still rebuilding our relationship. He moved across the country, saying he needed distance from everything that reminded him of the lies he'd lived with. We talk on the phone every week and see each other a few times a year. Do you ever wish you had known the truth sooner? He asked me during his last visit. No, I said without hesitation. Because if I had known the truth, I might not have been able to love you as completely as I did. I might have spent 28 years mourning my biological son instead of celebrating the son I was given. Jake seemed to find some peace in that answer. But there was one more revelation waiting for us. 3 months after Jake's visit, I received an unexpected call from Detective Riley, the FBI agent who had worked on Dorothy's case. Mrs. Harrison, I need you to come to my office. There's something we discovered during the final investigation that you need to know. About Dorothy. About Jake. My heart sank. What now? Just come in. And bring Jake if possible. He should hear this too. I called Jake immediately. He flew back the next day, and we went to the FBI office together, both of us dreading what new horror we were about to discover. Detective Riley sat us down in her office and pulled out a thick file. During our investigation of Dorothy's network, we tested DNA from all the suspected switched babies to try to reunite families. And? Jake asked tensely. Jake, we ran your DNA against every missing child case in our database, going back 30 years. She paused, looking between us. We found a match. To who? I whispered. To Patricia. We stared at her in confusion. I don't understand, Jake said. You already proved Patricia isn't my biological mother. Detective Riley opened the file and showed us new DNA results. Jake, Patricia is your biological mother. The room was dead silent. That's impossible, I said finally. You showed us DNA tests, proving Jake wasn't my biological son. Those tests were falsified, Detective Riley explained. Dorothy had a contact in the lab who created fake results to convince you that Jake wasn't related to you. Why would she do that? Because she needed you both to believe the lie. If Jake thought he wasn't really your son, he'd be more willing to participate in the conspiracy. And if you thought he wasn't your biological child, you might be more willing to let him go. Jake was staring at the real DNA results. So I am her son? You are definitely Patricia's biological son. Then what happened at the hospital? The baby switching? Detective Riley pulled out hospital records. Real ones this time. There was no baby switching, Jake. You were never switched at birth. Dorothy's entire story was a lie, designed to manipulate both of you. My head was spinning. But the medical records showing my baby died. Forged. Dorothy had contacts throughout the medical system who could create false documentation. The surveillance footage of babies being switched, staged, filmed at a different hospital with actors. Dorothy's claims about other switched babies, other families. Some of that was real. Dorothy did run baby switching operations, but not with your family. You were targeted for a different reason. If Jake was never switched, then why did Dorothy target us? I asked. Detective Riley pulled out financial records. Because of your husband's life insurance policy and your family's assets. Dorothy researched wealthy families with young children and developed long-term plans to eventually claim their inheritances. By pretending Jake was her grandson. By gradually inserting herself into your family's life and manipulating Jake to see her as his real grandmother. She planned to eventually convince him that you weren't his real mother and that he should help her claim the family assets. Jake looked sick. So Emma wasn't really my cousin. Emma was Dorothy's biological granddaughter, placed in your life to monitor you and eventually convince you to participate in the conspiracy. But I never believed Dorothy's story. I always knew Patricia was my real mother. That's why the plan took so long to implement. Dorothy spent years trying to convince you otherwise, using fake DNA tests, forged documents, and psychological manipulation. Detective Riley leaned forward. Jake. Dorothy's ultimate plan was to drive a wedge between you and Patricia, convince you that she had stolen you from your real family, and then manipulate you into helping eliminate her for the inheritance. I looked at Jake, my real son, my biological son, the child I had given birth to and raised with love for 28 years. All this time, I whispered, you really were my son. All this time, he replied, tears in his eyes. I was questioning everything I felt about you, wondering if my love for you was real or just programming. It was real, Detective Riley said gently. It was always real. Dorothy's manipulation couldn't change the biological bond between you, but she almost succeeded in making you both doubt it. Jake reached over and took my hand. Mom, I'm so sorry I doubted us. I'm so sorry I almost let her convince me that our family wasn't real. You have nothing to apologize for, I said, crying now too. Dorothy spent decades planning this manipulation. She was a professional at psychological warfare. Detective Riley closed the file. Patricia, Jake, I want you to know that Dorothy's case has led to the exposure and dismantling of similar operations across the country. Your courage in going through with the wire recording helped us save other families from the same fate. After we left the FBI office, Jake and I sat in my car for a long time, not speaking. Finally, Jake broke the silence. I feel like I've been in a nightmare for 2 years and I just woke up. How do you feel now? Knowing that everything we thought we knew was actually true all along. Relieved? Angry? Grateful? He paused. Mom, I wasted 2 years doubting everything about our relationship because I believed Dorothy's lies. Jake, you didn't waste anything. You survived. You questioned. You struggled. You worked through impossible psychological manipulation, and you came out the other side still able to love and trust. But I put you through hell too. We both went through hell, but we went through it together, and we came out stronger. Jake looked at me with eyes that seemed clearer than they had been in years. I want to come home. What about your life across the country? That wasn't my life. That was me running away from what I thought was a lie. But it wasn't a lie, was it? You're my mom. I'm your son. This is where I belong. 6 months later, Jake moved back home. Not back into my house. He was a grown man who needed his own space. But back to our city, back to our community, back to our family. He found a job, started dating again, and slowly rebuilt the life he had run away from. I keep thinking about all the time we lost, he said during one of our weekly dinners together. We didn't lose time, I corrected him. We were tested. Our bond was tested by a master manipulator who spent decades planning to destroy it. And it survived. But I doubted you, I doubted us. Jake, doubt is not the opposite of love. The opposite of love is indifference. You were never indifferent to me. Even when you were questioning everything, you still called me every week. You still came to visit. You still worried about my feelings. I just wish Dorothy had never entered our lives. I don't, I said, surprising him. You don't? Jake, Dorothy was evil. She destroyed families, murdered innocent people, and caused immeasurable pain. But she also proved something important about us. What? She threw everything she had at our relationship. Fake DNA tests, false documents, psychological manipulation, death threats, decades of planning, and she couldn't break us. We're stronger than her hatred. A year after Jake moved back, we received an unexpected visitor. A young woman named Sarah knocked on my door, looking nervous and uncertain. Mrs. Harrison, my name is Sarah Chen. I think Dorothy Williams might have targeted my family too. I invited her in, and she told us a story that sounded achingly familiar. Suspicious circumstances around her adoption, financial irregularities, a family friend who had been asking questions about her adoptive parents' assets. I read about your case in the newspaper, she said. Some of the details sound exactly like what's been happening to my family. Jake and I looked at each other. Dorothy was in prison, but her network had been vast, and it was possible that other operators were still out there. Sarah, I said, let me give you Detective Riley's contact information. And let me tell you something else. Trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, it probably is. Over the following months, we helped Sarah and her family expose another branch of the conspiracy. 3 more operators who had been targeting families in neighboring states. Our experience with Dorothy had taught us to recognize the patterns, the manipulation tactics, the warning signs that most people would miss. 2 years after learning the truth about the DNA results, I was cleaning out some old boxes in my attic when I found something that made my blood run cold. It was a letter, hidden in an old photo album, written in handwriting I didn't recognize. Patricia, if you are reading this, it means something has happened to me. I am Dr. Elizabeth Crenshaw, and I delivered your son Jake 28 years ago. I need you to know that Dorothy Williams approached me before your delivery, offering me money to switch your baby with another child. I refused, but I was afraid she would try to harm you or your baby if I reported her. I have been watching your family from a distance for years, making sure you and Jake were safe. Dorothy never stopped trying to find ways to manipulate your family, but I never gave her the opportunity she needed. If something happens to me, please know that Jake has always been your biological son. Any evidence suggesting otherwise is falsified. Dorothy has contacts who can create very convincing false documents. I kept a sample of Jake's blood from his birth, stored in my personal laboratory. If you ever need proof of his parentage, It is in safety deposit box 347 at First National Bank. The key is taped to the back of this letter. I am sorry I could not protect you from Dorothy's manipulation entirely, but I did everything in my power to preserve the truth. Dr. Elizabeth Crenshaw. The letter was dated 3 months before Dr. Crenshaw's death. Jake and I went to the bank together and opened Dr. Crenshaw's safety deposit box. Inside, we found medical samples, detailed documentation of Dorothy's attempts to infiltrate the hospital, and photographs of Dorothy meeting with various conspirators over the years. But most importantly, we found a video recording Dr. Crenshaw had made just before her death. On the recording, she revealed the full scope of Dorothy's plan. Not just to switch babies, but to create a network of medical professionals who could falsify records, stage accidents, and eliminate witnesses when necessary. Dorothy Williams is not just a con artist, Dr. Crenshaw said on the recording. She is a serial killer who has perfected the art of the long con. She doesn't just steal money, she steals entire families, entire identities, entire lives. The recording also revealed something else. Dorothy had been planning to kill Dr. Crenshaw for years, but had been waiting for the right moment to make it look accidental. If something happens to me, Dr. Crenshaw said, please know that it was not an accident. Dorothy has been threatening me for decades, and I have been living in fear that she would eventually eliminate me to cover her tracks. Dr. Crenshaw's recording provided the final evidence needed to charge Dorothy with additional murders and to expose the full scope of her network. More importantly, it confirmed what we had learned from the FBI. Jake had always been my biological son, and Dorothy's entire story had been an elaborate lie designed to destroy our family from within. Sitting here now, 3 years after that terrifying dinner, I think about the text message that started it all. Get up and go to the bathroom. Look out the window. Don't say anything to your mum about this text. The message wasn't meant for me. It was meant for Jake, sent by Dorothy as part of her plan to manipulate him into betraying me. But technology glitched, or fate intervened, or maybe Dr. Crenshaw's spirit was watching over us. Somehow, that message came to me instead. And because it came to me, I was able to save not just my own life, but Jake's life, and ultimately dozens of other families who were being targeted by Dorothy's network. Jake is getting married next month to a wonderful woman named Rebecca, a teacher he met at the community college, where he now works as a counselor, helping other families navigate trauma and rebuild trust. Mom, he said to me last week, do you think we would have survived Dorothy's manipulation if we hadn't discovered the truth when we did? I don't know, I answered honestly. But I know this. We survived because our love was stronger than her hatred. We survived because family isn't just about DNA. It's about choice, commitment, and the willingness to fight for each other. Even when everything seems impossible. Especially when everything seems impossible. The text message that night was meant to destroy my family. Instead, it saved us. And sometimes, when I'm feeling overwhelmed by everything we went through, I remember that simple truth. Love is stronger than deception. Truth is stronger than manipulation. Family is stronger than fear. And sometimes, just sometimes, the message meant to destroy you becomes the very thing that saves you.